I have a range of things. I mean, yes, universal basic income is something I support. Okay, a lot of modern monetary theory people don't. I do. I think it's a good idea. But in terms of the banking sector, I'd want to go back to small regional banks again, where they know their local business people and can therefore lend on their knowledge of who's a good and who's a bad business person. My father was a banker of that nature back in the 60s and 70s. And he literally he knew every business in Circular Quay, which is where he was based. So his knowledge of who was worth lending to, who wasn't, was pretty comprehensive. And you could get a loan as working capital or investment capital for a going concern. Getting money to entrepreneurs is much harder. If a bank lends to entrepreneurs, as a general rule, they're going to lose their money. So one thing I proposed was to change the nature of banking to make it a bit like a combination of retail banking and venture capital, that you could have a bank lending and taking an equity position in what I call entrepreneurial equity loans. So you might lend to 5 companies, 4 of them go bust, 1 of them succeeds, and the capital gain on the one that succeeds makes up for the capital losses on those that fail. By the way, some of my patrons, when I mentioned that, threw their hands up in horror and said, I don't want a bloody banker on my board. And I can completely understand that. So you'd have to have controls on how much control the bankers themselves had as a result of that. Their short-termism tends to get in the way. But something that meant banks would actually lend to entrepreneurs. And then also more fiat money in existence, so you don't need to borrow as much because there's more cash flow.
You also have to have an economy that has enough of a safety net to allow more people to take risks, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's how I see basic income. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is, and I know you've already advocated for publicly funded healthcare and a stronger education system, and better, more comprehensive welfare and joblessness support and unemployment income and all that kind of stuff. But does that run counter to the neoclassical model?
Oh yeah.
So why? Because you're creating malincentives.
They have a vision. If I do this, what am I drawing? Supply and demand curves, okay? And the intersection is nirvana. That's where nirvana occurs. And anything which deviates you from nirvana is a bad thing. That's the mental framework of somebody in neoclassical economics. Supply and demand, let the market choose. And if you have any intervention whatsoever, whether that's trade unions or governments, you move away from that equilibrium point, and that's a bad thing. And that's become the mindset we have. Now, when you have a mindset instead that says there's a symbiotic relationship between government and the private sector, then there are some things which are better done by the private sector, some things better done by public. I'll use an example in universities. I think university education should be difficult to get, hard to get into university, but free once you're there with the state paying the finance. And that would mean the students are then spending the money they get from the state. It's not a bureaucrat deciding where the money goes. It'll be the students receiving the scholarships. But in terms of the food on the campus, I want that to be capitalist. Thanks very much. I've experienced university mess halls. Give me the local, like a street food in Bangkok any day over the mass production stuff you get out of bureaucracies. So there's ways you can say there are areas where it's better to have public funding, and there are areas where it's better to have private innovation.